everybody, and welcome to another episode of the theology podcast. I guess I believe we are calling it Moonlit Theology now. I am your host Isaiah, or Colorless Moon 65. I'd like to welcome everybody in about today's conversation, where we're going with this. These last 4 episodes, we are still continuing with our little series about kind of the basics of Christianity. We have already gone through what the Bible is, reading it critically, and looking at it the different ways you're looking at it. And then, of course, we in the next 1 week, we looked at third episode, man. You go through enough of these and you get you start to lose track of what exactly you talked about when. So reading it critically, the third one, I believe we talked about foundational beliefs. Fourth one, this last one, we talked about the Nicene Creed, which is exactly what Christians believe, and you can go back and look at it then. Of course, this time we are talking the 2 covenants. Now, I think this is something that gets talked about and mentioned in passing a lot with Christians, and to the outside it looks kind of odd, and you kind of want to get in there and understand what the idea of a covenant is, because I think a lot of people, even myself in the past, have boiled it down to a covenant is a deal, and it's not quite that. A covenant is a little more than that. We'll go with a dictionary definition, and then we'll talk about what's going on with the covenants and kind of what a covenant is. As always, the structure of this is we will go into our presentation. We will talk about the 2 covenants, what they are, what a covenant is, what kind of covenant it is, and why and how that founds the beliefs and how we trust God. And then we will go into, of course, a Q&A like we usually do at the end. So if you have any questions, you can let us know then. And if you are not watching this live and you're watching this on YouTube, Spotify, wherever we put it up at, this is going to be live on Thursdays. Not Thursdays, sorry, on Tuesdays. We'll be going live on Tuesdays at around 3:30, 2:30, 3:30, depending on the day. You can pop us there, find us on TikTok and Twitch and everywhere, and you can find us then. Let's get into this. Okay, let's talk covenants. Because, first of all, again, covenant. It is a big word. It's a big deal. People talk about covenants. When you talk about a covenant, they approach them with a lot of reverence because there's very different kinds of covenants. Now, the 2 covenants, the covenant, of course, like always, it's best to begin with just a definition. And I'm not going in like making up a definition for covenant. This is the dictionary definition of a covenant. Agreement or promise, usually formal, between 2 or more people or groups to do or do not something something specified. Now, that is a very easy way. That sounds like a deal, right? What they don't talk about is that in most circumstances, covenants are about establishing a relationship. These are the rules of multiple relationships, and so when you talk about them, when you talk about the covenants, it's important to pop up that it's not just you do this, I'll do this, but it's that relationship. In a lot of these, we talk about marriage covenants. We talk about brotherhood covenants and that kind of thing, and those are the things. And so first and foremost, let's talk about the different kinds of covenants, because there's a lot of different kinds, but they can be boiled down to 2 different types of covenants. There's a parity covenant, and there is a suzerain vassal covenant. There are other covenants. Marriage covenant is a type of parity covenant, whereas like an engagement in these, especially in biblical times, was a suzerain vassal covenant. And we'll talk about that a little bit. There's people that have done a better job on this. I can shout out the Bama podcast. They're much bigger than us. They do a great job about breaking down covenants. So you have the parity covenant, which is mutual agreement. These 2 people are about the same standing with each other. They negotiate with each other the terms of this covenant, and then they agree to it, usually symbolically through oaths or through dinners or anything like that. This is where you get the idea of like brotherly bonds between people who are not blood related. This is when you're like, he's my brother in battle. We've been through all of this. We are of equal standing, and we've kind of agreed to do these things for each other. You know, we will be loyal to each other. We'll be great friends. And so these parity covenants are the relationship there. You are just formalizing a relationship that might already be there. And so that's not the type of covenant we're actually going to be talking about today. Parity covenants come and go, but the two covenants that we talk about are not parity covenants. They are this second kind, which is a suzerain vassal covenant, which is also could be called a lord and servant covenant, a master and servant covenant. It is between a greater party, and a lot of times it's kings, and lesser parties. Sometimes they're kings, sometimes they're minor lords, sometimes they're not. It's this idea that somebody greater than you comes to you and says, I am going to make a deal with you. I would like to be in a relationship with you. You are my servant, you are my vassal, and I am your master. I am your and so a lot of times these covenants are not negotiated at all. Unlike parity covenants, when a suzerain comes to a vassal and says, we're going to make a covenant, we are going to make an agreement and a relationship with each other, I am going to dictate, the master will dictate to the servant what the terms are. They are not negotiated. You don't negotiate. You're dealing with a party stronger than yourself. And so refusal can also mean a lot of things. And so we get into that. It's very important that it's that kind of covenant that we're talking about. And there's different ways that those covenants come about, and we're going to talk about it in a second when we discuss the first covenant. Well, right now when we discuss the first covenant. Because there are two covenants biblically. There is the original covenant, which is called the Mosaic covenant. It is talked about and foreshadowed in Genesis and set up and dictated in Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, within the books of the law. And so, again, these are suzerain vassal covenants. God comes to the people and says, I'm making a covenant with you. I'm coming into relationship with you. Here is the terms of the relationship. And so at first you have the original one, and I bring up Genesis 15 because I like to cite my sources when I'm talking about these. We bring up Genesis 15. In fact, when you look at the full story of Genesis 15, it's Genesis 15 through 17. It's a long thing. I recommend you read it if you want to understand more about these kind of things. It's a dense couple chapters, but essentially it starts with Abram. People call him Abram. Avram's the Hebrewic pronunciation. I just think it flows better. Avram flows better than Abram. And I also put down Abraham because this is the covenant in which his name changes. You have the initial covenant with Abraham, which is leading to the covenant with Sinai, because it says you will... There's debates about whether it is the same covenant, whether the Abrahamic covenant and the Mosaic covenant are the same or if they're different. They're lumped into the same, the first covenant. First made with Abraham and his descendants. Because his descendants are involved, they can be linked to that thing. We're not going to read everything in the chapter, but we are going to read at least a little bit because this matters to what comes up. We're going to be reading a little bit about, where is it? 15. We're going to go into this just a little bit. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because everybody can read it and bring up their own ideas on it. So essentially we're going to set it up. The first part of the story says God making a promise to him and Abram asking, how will I know you're going to keep your promise? And so the Lord says this to him. Where is it? Sorry, I had it marked, but I took the mark out. Oh Lord, how can I know I'll gain possession of this? Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Setting up this covenant. They're setting up this Abrahamic covenant of bring me these things. Bring me these things. And I want to, fascinatingly, and this is why I think cultural context is important, and we're understanding cultural context. He says, bring me these things. Abraham brought all to them, cut them in two, and arranged them the halves opposite each other. Birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then birds. So in this story, in this text, what happens is God says, bring me these things. Bring me a goat. Bring me a heifer. Bring me 2 birds. And he says, bring me these things. And Abraham immediately knows what this is. Abraham immediately knows what this is. This isn't something that's new in the text here. This is a cultural tradition of the time called a blood path. And so God doesn't say, do these things. Don't lay them out this way. He comes and Abraham goes, oh, I know what this is. I know what this is. And so what a blood path is, if you don't know, it's gruesome. This is going to be a little bit more of a gruesome. I'm not going to go too in detail. What it is you cut the animals in half, put each side on a crevice, let the blood flow into the crevice. The reason behind that is this covenant is a type of marriage covenant. The first person, the weaker person, comes through. It's a betrothal. Normally, it's made between two, a father of a bride and the father of a groom. The father of the bride is, of course, the stronger in this situation, being the handing away the bride in that they have what the other wants. And so in this time period, it was very important that, hey, who's in charge here? And this was very, very much a betrothal type thing. And so talking about descendants of Jerusalem, we lost talking about descendants of to Abraham's descendants to Israel, talking about those things and this becoming a betrothal. Abraham knows what he's setting up. When he brings them, he goes, oh, this is a betrothal. In fact, this is not just some act within Bible. There are still some cultures that practice this today. The Bedouins are a good example. They still practice a form of blood paths. And so what the idea is, the first person walks through the path of blood, saying, I agree to the terms of the deal, whatever they are. And if I fail in my side, I will walk through the blood like this. You will walk in my blood like this. Some say like my blood will flow like these animals is the best way to put it. And then so the vassal walks first, saying, I agree. If I don't uphold my end, you will walk through my blood as I am this blood. And so you will. Then the suzerain walks through, and that's done. And in fact, at the end of this, what ends up happening? I'll read the text here. Where are they? As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep. A thick, dreadful darkness came over. Then the Lord said to him, "No, for certain your descendants will be strangers in a country." God talks to him about what's going to happen, gives him a prophecy. Hey, your people are going to be strangers in a country. This is foreshadowing Egypt and things later in the text. But you will die of old age within this place. Your people will come back, and I will give them this land. Then when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a fire pot with blazing torches appeared, passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram. Now, what's important here is, and this is kind of why like people talk about the Old Testament foreshadowing the New. The Old Testament, in this case, foreshadowing the New, God going through as the vassal and then the suzerain. Because Abram stops. It says he waits till night. He sets it up. He sets it up long enough for birds to come in and attack the pieces, and he has to shoo off birds of vultures, essentially, birds of prey. And he's like, okay, he's hesitating because he knows he can't uphold that. The covenants with gods are very complicated, and with God especially is very complicated. And so that happens. And in 17, the same thing is when he says, hey, I'm going to make a covenant with you and your descendants. With your descendants. You've already agreed to be my vassal. I will make it with your descendants too. And then you get to Sinai. And Sinai is after the people of Israel are brought out of Egypt. They're brought into the desert. And once they're brought into the desert, God comes to them and says, okay, you are my people. You want to live in relationship with me. Here is the terms of our relationship. Your suzerain and vassal. In fact, there's a lot of times where it seems like Israel pushes and God kind of relents and doesn't push back. In fact, Sinai is one of them. God says, I will speak to you, and the people of Israel come back and say, wait, don't speak to us. Please, we'll surely be destroyed. And the fear of that takes hold. And he's like, fine, I'll speak through there. There's this theme throughout the Bible of God meeting people where they're at. And this is at the point when the 10 Commandments come into play. At Sinai, when that relationship is established and they say, fine, I've brought you out of Egypt already. Do you want to be in relationship with me? Here's the terms of the relationship. And so it's very much law first. Here are the rules to be in relationship. The big idea is there's a lot of blood sacrifice for sin and for the temporary forgiveness of sin and for breaking this agreement. That's essentially what sin is here, is missing the mark, failing in this agreement to uphold all the laws that are set by it. And it is an impossible standard. It was an impossible standard. God knew it was impossible because what he told Abraham to do was to walk upright and blameless next to him. Yeah, no, that's not something somebody can really accomplish against a perfect God, is walking upright and blameless next to God. That doesn't happen. That's not possible for people. And so coming into that and God saying, here's how you walk blamelessly. You're descendants of Abraham. You've come out of Egypt. We'll talk about Egypt later and kind of how that competes with Israel, because there's the discussion of like what they learned in the 400s in Egypt and how some of it has to be unlearned and they have to learn other stuff as they go. But you get the new first covenant, the Mosaic covenant, and then you get into the second. Now we get into the New Testament where Jesus says, hey, I'm bringing a new covenant. The first, and so we're going to talk about that real quick. We're moving into the second covenant. Now, foretold. This is important because the time and time again, there's a lot of prophecy in the Old Testament. We have a number of major prophets and minor prophets in there, and some of them talk about the coming of the Messiah. Others talk about the end times and all different things, the future of Israel and all kinds of stuff in there. And so we talk about what is being foretold. And Jeremiah, I'm actually going to pull it up in Hebrews because I have that note marked here, and talk about that because it is being foretold. So, the new covenant isn't just Jesus doesn't say, oh, I'm bringing the new covenant. He's referencing something that's already understood, a prophecy that's already been given by God. And so when he says, I'm bringing a new covenant, the Hebrews around him knew, oh, there's a new covenant. We already know there's supposed to be a new covenant. It's not like he came up and said, oh yeah, we're just doing away with the old. This was prophesied beforehand that, hey, this covenant will come to an end. The Mosaic covenant will come to an end. It will be fulfilled. My end, your end, all of our ends, we will be fulfilled. And in fact, the text says, the time is coming when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judea. It will not be like the covenant I made with your forefathers when I took them by the hand to lead them out of Egypt, because they did not remain faithful to that my covenant, my covenant. That's what it says, my covenant. But and I turned away from them. Declares the Lord, this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel. After that time, I will put my laws on their minds and hearts. And we're going to get into the rest of that in a second, because now they're getting to what the new covenant is, because there's a number of promises with the new covenant. And so we get into this next section, which is the promises of the new covenant. What's important here is this is not New Testament. This is Jeremiah. This is still Hebrew. This is still Old Testament going, hey, by the way, I'm bringing a new covenant. Here are the terms you can expect from it. And so one thing that I talk about is, hey, when this new covenant comes, it will already be paid for. That's what's important is, with the first covenant, you had to pay for your salvation, not gold, but in sacrifice. You brought your sacrifices to the temple, to the priests. And it's like, the people are ashamed. They've broken the rules. They've sinned. And they come to the priest and say, forgive us of our sins. Here is the sacrifice that I'm told I have to give to repair this relationship. And at the end here, something they do is, Jesus says, this is the blood of my covenant poured out for you. And it's like, ooh, the blood has already been spilled and already been paid for. A better sacrifice will not come for the second covenant than Jesus. And I think that's really important because it does a few things. It has to already be paid for, because Jesus has to already pay for it. The second covenant has to be paid for because we can't pay it. That's the idea, is there is no covenant to walk blameless next to God in which you will succeed in walking blamelessly. You will fail every time. And that's consistent throughout the Bible. You will fail to walk next to God blamelessly. And what's important is with the second covenant, the new covenant, Christ says, I have already spilled the blood for you. The blood has already been spilled. The sacrifice has already been made for you to remain blameless next to me. And that's something that's very common with God in the Old Testament and in the New, is it's already being paid for. When he brings them out of Egypt, even the first covenant, you go back to the Mosaic covenant, he brings them out of Egypt first. He doesn't say, oh, I will be your God and then I'll bring you out of Egypt. He brings them out of Egypt and then says, by the way, here is the covenant that you wanted. Here's the rules that you wanted. Here's how you walk next to me. I have already done something great. I've already paid for it. I've already done what I said I would, pulled you out of Egypt, and now here's the new covenant. Here's the covenant. Here's the Mosaic covenant. Here are the rules. You want to walk blameless next to me? Because when they bring him to Sinai, he's not like, you all have to be with me. He goes, no, wait. They come to Sinai willingly. They say, we want to walk blamelessly with you, Lord. And they come and saying they want to walk with God. They follow him. They have every opportunity to split off, to return to Egypt. In fact, they talk about it. Maybe we should return to Egypt. And it's mentioned time and time. They want to be there. And that's what's important, is that willingness has to be there from them. God already pulled them out of Egypt. And then when he got there, he said, okay, I've already pulled you. I've already given you grace and pulled you out of Egypt. Now let me tell you what it means to walk blamelessly with me. And that laws. And so being already paid for also fulfills the old covenant. Because if you remember the Abrahamic covenant, if either side is not kept, then the blood of God must flow. That's also why it's important that it was God on the cross. Is because when you fulfill that old covenant, you need a perfect sacrifice. And that means the only thing that's perfect in this covenant, the only way you can have the perfect sacrifice for this covenant, is for the blood of the one who promised their blood will flow to flow. God promised his blood would flow to Abraham if they failed the covenant. He promised Abraham that if man failed to walk blamelessly next to him, God's blood would flow. And so that's why it's important that God is there. And so that fulfills the old covenant. Now we get into what the new covenant is. And this is the stuff from Jeremiah. This is the stuff that I will be reading out. This is why I stopped us there. It's like, okay, now we know that a covenant is coming. And now we talk about what that covenant is. That covenant says, declares the Lord, this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will a man teach his neighbor or a man his brother, saying, know the Lord, because they will all know me. From the least of them to the greatest, for I will forgive their wickedness, and I will remember it no more. That's something very fascinating with this. Those are the terms of the new covenant. Before you get into everything Jesus talked about, before you get into everything, we have Jeremiah, back in Jeremiah, saying, we know the terms of the new covenant. We know what's coming, and we know the terms of it. The terms are 4 parts, and I love it. The first part is, I will put my laws in their minds and write them on their hearts. There's not a set of laws in the temple that we obey. The laws are written on our hearts. We want to be, when under the new covenant, they want to be closer to God, so it's written on them. We know what the rules are. Internally, we know what the rules are, and if we want to draw closer to God, the agreement is in us, not in some distant temple. And that's something that's very important about this, is with the Mosaic covenant, the relationship was in the temple. God was in the temple. And now he's saying, wait, no. The laws that I put in the temple won't be in the temple anymore. They will be with you. And then the second part is, I will be their God, and they will be my people. He doesn't say, I'm making a covenant with this people. He say, whoever believes, I will be their God. They will be my people. There's that personal relationship there. Not only is God saying you're my people, but we're saying you're your God. You're our God. There's the personal relationship that gets established there. That's why it's a covenant, is because that relationship gets established. I will be their God, and they will be my people. No longer will they teach their neighbor or say to one another, know the Lord, because they will all know me, from the least to the greatest. The promise is, you will know God. That personal relationship, you will know God. Because for the Mosaic covenant, when it's taught about within Christian theology, the Jewish people knew the law. They didn't know the relationship with God. They didn't know that because God was in the Holy of Holies. He was in the temple. He was where only the high priest could enter twice a year after being ritually purified, or everyone would be struck down. It's not this, you will know me. And so when you get into the text here and you talk about what's being promised and understood, it's like, these are the promises of the second covenant. Because every covenant has promises. These are the promises that the second covenant are built on. Your agreement will be with me. You will know the Lord. That's important. The relationship will be personal. You won't be sacrificing in a temple, for I will forgive their wickedness and will remember their sins no more. Complete forgiveness. That's the last bit. It's not just it's wiped out, it's and will remember no more. I won't remember what they did anymore. I will completely put it from the mind. That complete forgiveness wasn't something in the Mosaic covenant. You had to give sacrifices constantly. The temple had sacrifices constantly. You had atonement sacrifices. You had daily sacrifices because the wickedness and sins are still remembered no matter what. The price still has to be paid. The temple was still paying for the price constantly. And the new covenant says, for I will remember their wickedness no more. I think there was another one, but there wasn't. So when you're talking about the two covenants, those are the promises. And Jesus is the fulfillment of the old law and the establishment of the new promise. He fulfills a bunch of prophecies to fulfill the old law, and we believe that as Christians. So we talked about what we believe there before with the Nicene Creed, and now we get into, okay, here's the terms of the second covenant. Here's the relationship that's being established, and you'll notice it's a very personal relationship. Nowhere in here does it say that the church saves you. Your salvation does not come from the church, does not come from the temple. It's this agreement. The laws will be written on your minds and hearts. That's why you hear a bunch of Christians say they get convicted about stuff, is because the agreement is internal. You have that personal relationship will be established, and then they will know the Lord. That is the two covenants. I think this is a very good conversation piece to be happening just before Easter, because Easter is happening, and so we will be getting into our Q&A. We always do a Q&A at the end of this. For everybody who's listening on Spotify, YouTube. Oh my gosh, I got hiccups. Wherever it comes up. The video will be cutting here, but after this live, we always do a Q&A where people can ask the questions they want to hear. They can ask about the topics we were discussing. They can ask about other stuff that's been on their minds and on their hearts, and we can get into that. So we will begin that here. Anybody who's here, you are welcome to ask your questions. Otherwise, we'll be wrapping up.